All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stress 101 Reduction, Management, and You. My name is Meaghan Wiggins. I am a full time mental health therapist and art therapist working with Cancer Support Community of Central Indiana. And I am providing this presentation today in cooperation with Hendricks Regional Health. Um, so that's just a little bit about me. If you have any questions, like I said, go ahead and save them for the end, or feel free to use your chat feature as needed. But let's go ahead and jump right on in and learn a little bit about stress and what ways we can utilize to deal with it. So first and foremost, let's get reacquainted with our bodies. You can go ahead and raise your hand at home or type in your chat. If you've ever heard of the mind-body connection, is this something new, or maybe you've heard of it somewhere before? Um, but either way, this is the idea that our bodies, our physical bodies, that is directly tied to our psychological health. So our physical health and our psychological health are connected very much together. So when we're not feeling great physically, that's going to affect our emotions, or vice versa. If we're not feeling great emotionally, if we're feeling down in the dumps, that is going to take a toll on our physical health. So if you've ever heard the expression, you'll don't worry, you're going to worry yourself sick. Well, there's quite a bit of truth to that, unfortunately. Um, our thoughts influence how we feel, and then that then in turn affects how we behave or don't behave. If you tend to think of something you're really good at and tell yourself you're good at it, you're going to do those good things again and again, and you're going to excel at them. So I'll throw myself under the bus. Um, Sometimes I like to think of myself as being a great doodler. I like drawing. So if I tell myself regularly, like, hey, I'm a pretty decent artist, I think I've got this, I'm going to feel good about myself, and I'm going to want to draw more. I'm going to want to engage in the hobby a bit more. Unfortunately, the dark side of that is also true. So if you have a tendency to tell yourself you're not a good person or you're not good at something, that is going to affect your feelings. And then that in turn is going to affect how you feel and how your body feels. So that inner dialogue you have with yourself, and we'll talk more about this in this presentation. It's important to try to be as positive as possible. That doesn't mean ignoring the negative, but trying to be realistic. Um, and like I already said, with behaviors influencing the way we feel, a great example of that, which we'll touch on in this presentation, is exercise. But we'll get there. Oh, oh no, it's stuck. So, $1 million question, right? Why on earth do I have so much stress? Well, the good news is everyone has stress. Stress is something everyone on this call is dealing with. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, right? Not just everyone on in this call, but everyone on the planet, down to our spouses, our kiddos, our family members, our friends, even our cats and our dogs. There's something beautiful about being united in going through stress together. Um, we do have inside of us, our bodies do have an automatic response system to stress, our fight, flight, freeze response, if you will, which was really, really great when we were in caves, when we were being chased by woolly mammoths or saber-toothed tigers. We were more than prepared to either fight the threat, run away from the threat, or immobilize until the threat left us alone, which was really great. But the unfortunate news is, as our stressors have become a bit more complicated, our fight or flight freeze response is not the best for, metaphorical stressors. So we can't fight emails, unfortunately. We can't run away from our jobs, not yet. And we can't, freeze all the time. Um, and what makes stress so much worse is not only is our automatic response system not necessarily the best go-to for stress, but sometimes if we have too much stress or a lot going on at once, it unfortunately can get stuck in the on position, and that can make it even more difficult to calm down, because not only are you fighting with whatever stress you're facing, but now you're trying to fight internally with your body and trying to prepare for the threat that's there that you can't physically run away from. Um, so I'm sure you're wondering, well, Megan, of course, if stress is a natural phenomenon, then it's not bad for my health, right? Of course not. No, that would be a pretty sad presentation, wouldn't it? No, not exactly. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Stress affects us in multiple ways. And that's not just physically, but also emotionally, psychologically, mentally. Um, we can see this, with increased fatigue. So if you're finding it really hard to get true, good, restful sleep, or if don't have any energy throughout your day despite getting adequate sleep, oh, those are signs your body's trying to tell you something's gone wrong. Or if you notice you're a little bit cranky, a little bit short with people, maybe a little irritable. um, those are other big signs where our body's trying to tell us something's not right, something's gone wrong, along with a slew of other physical health problems such as cardiovascular issues, other chronic diseases. Um, and, you know, when we use negative ways or unhealthy ways, I should say, to deal with that stress, that can exacerbate that. So when we see that maybe we're not doing something healthy to deal with our stress, that's going to make all these side effects that much worse. It's a little scary, right? Well, then I'm sure you're wondering then, well, Megan, if you're talking this negatively about it, there's nothing I can do to stop the stress, right? Well, yes and no. Again, it's not that cut and dry, unfortunately. Um, hopefully you noticed this presentation was not called stress destruction and elimination, but stress reduction and management. Um, Stress is something that is going to be consistent. And no matter what phase of life or whatever you're going through, stress is going to be there. And while we can't necessarily control when we get stressed or what stresses us out, we can manage how we deal with that stress and how we respond to it. But it's not an easy task, always easier said than done. So then, you know, what can I do? What on earth can I do if I can't, help that I'm going to be stressed out and I can't absolutely 100% eliminate it? I'm glad you asked. There's a lot of different ways, which we'll go through in the time we have today, of ways that can be effective in dealing with stress. But some things that are important before we jump into these, to remember that stress management is a skill. It's something you have to develop and work towards. And, you know, chances are the first thing you try is not necessarily going to feel natural or jive with you. It's important to keep working through it and to develop that skill. And also with that, don't be frustrated. Just because the first thing isn't working well for you doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Try something else, or maybe try it at a different time. Might be useful then. But it does take time to figure out what feels good for me, what's actually effective for me. But yes, and of course, there's lots of different ways. There's only so many ways I can cover in one presentation, and these are most certainly not the only ways to deal with your stress. Feel free to change it up, get creative, put your own spin on it. I welcome it. So let's jump right on in. Our first stress reduction technique we'll talk about is mindfulness, which first and foremost, mindfulness is something that is going to come up with a lot of stress reduction techniques I have for you today. A lot of these are based in these principles of mindfulness. So all that is to say, what on earth is mindfulness, Megan? Well, I love this image because it's a great way of giving a really, really clear cut definition of what mindfulness is. So, as you can see, we have a guy here and he's maybe had a long day by the looks of that thought bubble. He's taking his dog for a walk, and you know what? He is just inundated with the thoughts. He's thinking about his friends. He's thinking about, having to drive to the park maybe, or maybe even to work. He's thinking about maybe he's got a presentation to give. He's thinking about the fact that he can't find his socks, his songs. He's got songs in his head. He's got bills to pay, thinking about what he's going to have for dinner. He's inundated. But his dog on the right is truly just focused on, he's not thinking about the next time he's going to eat. He's not thinking about the bills he has to pay. Lucky dog, right? He's simply focused on the four trees in front of him, maybe the sunshine, maybe the animals that are there or the smells that he's smelling. He's there in that moment. And that's exactly what mindfulness is. It's there being there in the moment, not being like our friend on the left who's thinking about the past or the future, but being right here and now in the present. Um, and doing this without judgment. So if you're having a hard time staying focused in the moment, it's okay. Just try to work with yourself to bring yourself back to that present moment. But yes. A lot of stress reduction techniques, again, are based in this concept. So you'll probably see it come up again, I promise. The next stress reduction we're going to talk about is breathing. So sounds very simple, um, but I want you to think of that mind body connection. Breathing is a great way of connecting with that part of our minds that helps calm us down, ease us a bit, helps us relax. And there's truly no wrong way to breathe. You just need to breathe as deeply as feels comfortable, listen to your body, and not overexert yourself. If you experience any pain while you're breathing in a mindful way, that's not going to help. So make sure you're being attentive with yourself, making sure you're not pushing yourself to that limit and listening. One type of breathing technique I have for you today, and we'll practice it after I talk about it, is square breathing. I have my lovely graphic here, which demonstrates inhaling on 4 counts, holding for 4 counts, exhaling for 4 counts, and then resting for 4 counts. And you can adjust this as needed. If 4 feels too short or too long, you can add to that number, decrease from that number. Again, just make sure you're listening to your body. So if you could go ahead and find yourself in a comfy position, maybe both feet on the floor if you're sitting somewhere, maybe your hands in your lap. And if you feel comfy and can close your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. We're going to do one quick rotation of square breathing. So go ahead and inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, and rest, 2, 3, 4. So take a minute to sit with yourself and think about, how did that feel? Do you notice any changes in yourself that maybe you were feeling a little stressed out? Maybe you're a little restless before, but how do you feel now? Do you feel different? Do you feel better? Do you not feel better? Um, and for these questions I'm asking you, these are things to keep in mind if you do this breathing technique. Check in with yourself. Ask yourself how you're feeling before you do the exercise, and check in after you do it. Next up, we have journaling, but before we talk about journaling, we need to do a little quick subheader of Stress 101, which is Emotions 101. If it isn't new news to you, any holding in any emotion that we have is bad. I want you to think of a Coke bottle and some Mentos. So, for example, let's say you get up late and you slept through your alarm and you didn't realize that you got a meeting. Well, you're shaking yourself up a little bit like a Coke bottle. Okay, well, now I've got to get in the car, but oh my gosh, there's construction on 65 again. It never stops construction. So maybe that shakes us up a little more. And we get into work and we are a little bit late, but it turns out we also forgot our lunch for work. That gives, I don't know about you, that's a pretty big shake for me, but that shakes us up even more. Well, not only did we forget our lunch, but we got a bunch of emails that we didn't get through, or we got, a lot of meetings coming up that maybe we weren't expecting to have. And that's probably a huge, huge shake. And then after our huge, shaky, stressful day, we come home and maybe our spouse says to us, "Hey, why didn't you do the dishes?" Well, then that becomes a very small little Mentos conversation in our already shaky Coke bottle. And what happens when you add Mentos to a Coke, right? It explodes. Coke goes everywhere and it's sticky and uncomfortable, and it's not really a fun time for anybody. So that's why it's important to keep an eye on your metaphorical Coke bottle and kind of twist that lid off a little bit, let some of that pressure out of the bottle so you're not holding on to that. Um, but sometimes talking about our feelings and thoughts is hard. Sometimes it's not easy to do. But that's where doing something like journaling can be super helpful. Journaling is a great way to express your feelings while also keeping them a bit private. And you don't have to have, one of those super fancy journals from Michaels, or super fancy pen. Any type of paper is fine. Or I know phones have lots of notes apps. You can use those too. And there are lots of journaling prompts online for free, or you can just write out what comes to mind. It's not really important what the journal looks like so much getting through it and doing it. I, for one, am guilty of having a bunch of journals. And one of my favorite prompts from one of my guided journals is think about the last time you were truly vulnerable and what did that feel like? And I wrote a whole page, well, a little more than a page on that. But, who can't write a page on vulnerability, right? So if that sounds like something that, is interesting, if you've never tried journaling in this specific way, maybe give it a try. Because again, there's no wrong way to do it. Next up, we're going to talk about gratitude and gratefulness. And I don't want you to think if someone's told you, hey, what do you have to be upset about? You have so much good going on for you, or to just be happy when you're upset, because that's not really helpful, right? It doesn't help when someone says, well, you don't really have anything to be upset about. That's a little invalidating. It doesn't help us through the problem. But being grateful is a bit different. It helps us to rethink where our attitude is. So instead of focusing and fixating on all that's going wrong or all the negativity that we're being faced with, it encourages us to see what's going well, what's the positives, what are the things I appreciate that make me feel good, and can hopefully pull you out of that stressful place. The great thing about this, it can kind of combine with our last stress reduction, journaling. So one simple thing you can do for journaling is every night before you go to bed, write down just 3 things you appreciated about that day. And it doesn't matter if they were big or small, if you got to talk to someone who you hadn't talked to in a while, if you had a really yummy lunch and really liked what you had, or if you saw some really, if you really liked the rain that we got today. What's important to focus on the things you appreciate on. It really helps to reframe our thoughts, and helps us see those silver linings that can be a little bit difficult to see when we're stressed out. So yeah, give it a try. Next up, of course, the licensed mental health professional is going to talk about therapy. Surprise, surprise! If you didn't think we were going to talk about therapy. So therapy is not the same as it used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This field is constantly changing and transforming, but that doesn't mean this can't be scary. Um, Opening up to someone that you don't know and having to be really vulnerable and share, all your thoughts and feelings, that can be pretty scary. But the great thing about, seeing someone who you don't know is that these people, or people like myself, I should say, have no investment in your life. We trust what you bring to us. Um, we're trained not to be judgmental and to work with you through your problems. We are on your team. Ultimately, we want you to be better. Um, the other great thing is maybe having an outsider's opinion might help you see maybe some things that you didn't notice before if you use something that's unhealthy and didn't think about it because it's just what you've always done. Sometimes it can help to have a fresh set of eyes look at things. Um, Therapists, however, are not one size fit all. We're not genes, unfortunately. Um, we're kind of like doctors. You have to work with us, maybe come to a few sessions, find someone that, really vibes with you, makes you feel heard and validated. And that can take 1 or 2 sessions. The best rule of thumb is, try at least 3 sessions before you decide it's not for you. And even if that therapist isn't for you, that doesn't mean there isn't someone out there for you. So, give it a try. And of course, I, as as a mental health therapist working with CSC, I do have to plug Cancer Support Community very quickly. We do offer free individual, couple, family, and art therapy counseling services, completely free to all the people we listed. I listed below. So yes. Next up, uh, we have art therapy. So you can go ahead and use your chat or raise your hand at home if you're at home. If you've ever heard of art therapy, if this is familiar at all to you, or maybe you've seen it on a coloring book once or twice, I am actually not going to talk as in depth as I'd like to about art therapy because I do have another presentation devoted entirely to art therapy. So we're going to touch on it just a little bit. Oh, thanks, Zara. Yes, she's heard of it. I got one yes at least. So yeah, art therapy, I'll go into depth on it. I believe that presentation is in August. If you're interested, of course, you can let me know and I'll definitely send out invitations to you just like for this presentation. Um, but we're going to touch on it just very lightly and go into depth at a different time. So, the American Art Therapy Association has a very long definition, so I've taken out the big parts that are super important for you. First and foremost, art therapy is a mental health and human services profession, which means to say we use applied psychological theory and human experience within a relationship with a trained professional. Um, so what all that is to say is the art is a vehicle to look at what is going on in my life, where am I struggling, where can I be better, um, because all of that does come out in what you make. And you're working with someone who guides you through that process, helping you maybe see some things that you didn't see before. Art therapy is not just coloring books. Again, I know there are lots of coloring books out there that say art therapy. They have their place, and I will talk about that in August, but art therapy coloring books are not specifically art therapy. They're still good. They're still awesome, but they are not art therapy. Again, you're not working with someone to understand what you're making. And there's been research done, and studies have shown that our stress hormone, cortisol, goes down when we engage in art making. We can see our mood improve and better insight because we're looking at our problems in an entirely different way. Talking is sometimes helpful for people, but sometimes making art through your problems is another way of being helpful, as well as improved esteem. Want a really, really easy way to deal with anger or stress or frustration? Scribble. Scribbling is one of our earliest ways we learn how to art make, is just scribbling on paper and letting that energy out. So the next time you're feeling really stressed out, go ahead and scribble. Get those feelings out. CSC, again, got to do this cancer support community plug. We do offer free art therapy sessions individually, and we have a couple of art therapy things. We have a free open art studio, which is virtual at this time because of COVID. We have Art Cart that is in some infusion centers and bedside art therapy as well. And then with Community Health Network, we do have an art therapy group, which is every first Friday at 1. And if you decide to join that, you do get a free art kit. So free art materials to make things. But yes, if you've never thought about making art to deal with your problems, maybe it's something that might be helpful. So moving on, I told you we were going to come back to exercise, and here we are. Exercise is really, really great, again, because of that mind-body connection. It really focuses on our physical health, but that doesn't mean it won't make us feel great emotionally. Once you finish working out or doing any type of exercise, these wonderful feel-good chemicals get released in your brain and say, hey, you know what, it's all okay. I'm all relaxed, all is right with the world. And is actually shown to combat fatigue after treatments specifically. Um, and even better news, if you feel like, well, Meaghan, I don't have the time to go to the gym for hours upon hours every single day. Good news is you don't have to. Absolutely any type of movement counts as exercise. Motion is lotion for your body. So if you're going for a walk, if you're walking the dog, if you're cleaning around your house, so vacuuming or sweeping or mopping or playing with your grandkids, all of this is exercise. Maybe it looks a little bit different, but that's the important part to consider. Um, Again, you don't have to go to the gym for 4 hours for 6 days straight to get your exercise in. Cancer Support Community does offer free exercise classes. You can check our calendar or website for what we're offering specifically. Speaking of physical activity, I want to talk a little bit about yoga. Yoga is probably one of the oldest forms of stress reduction I'm going to talk about. Stating one of the first yoga exercises is dated back to 5,000 years ago, if you can believe that. It's great because it is a total body workout and does burn calories, tone and stretch your muscles, improve relaxation and balance and inner calm. But the great thing about yoga is it can be adapted for the chair. So, if you're thinking, Meaghan, I'm not a yogi, I'm not a pretzel, I can't bend in certain ways, that's great, you don't have to be. Um, Yoga can be really, really great to recenter, encourage you to be in the moment, not thinking about the past or the present, but just be with your body and your breath. Um, Cancer Support Community does offer free yoga classes all around the city at Hendricks Regional Health. It's every Tuesday from 5:30 to 6:30. And since everything is being held virtually right now, all of our yoga classes are virtual. Everything is modified for the chair, so you really don't have to be a pretzel, I promise. Definitely promise. Our next stress reduction, which you may not necessarily think of it, but nutrition. If you've ever heard that saying, you are what you eat, that's because there's a lot of truth to that. Um, Eating foods that are, good for us, that nourish our bodies, improve our mood and our physical health. Again, that mind-body connection. Told you it was going to come back. Um, there are no foods that are, superfoods or magic that will instantaneously make us feel better. But it's important to keep a diet that is balanced. So not just protein, maybe some fruits and veggies, all different kind of colors of the rainbow. And another part of nutrition is considering to eat mindfully. So, not rushing through your food, maybe setting aside time to sit and be with your food and focus on how does it feel? How do I feel as I eat this food? Is it making me feel great? Where am I noticing any changes within myself as I eat? Um, but with nutrition, we don't want to expect perfection because that's not realistic. No one eats healthy 100% of the time. I will definitely throw myself under the bus and say I am definitely not 100% eating healthy all of the time. So there are some days where I do not know what vegetables are, and that's okay. It's important to use the 80/20 rule and always, be balanced in what you do. Um, Not just with nutrition, but in everything. Cancer Support Community does offer cooking and nutrition classes as well for free, I might add. Um, so our next piece of advice, well, not advice, excuse me. Our next piece that we'll talk about for stress reduction is social supports. It's really important to have a healthy social support system around us. And please note, I said healthy. Uh, if you ever have friends or family members and you talk to them and, let's say you're not feeling great after, like, well, I don't feel good about myself, then that's a sign that maybe we need to distance ourselves from those people. Um, Keeping supports that are toxic are not good for ourselves. We want to build up those supports that, we talk to them and we walk away from those conversations feeling good. We feel empowered. We say, hey, I showered today. I recycle. I feel good about myself. I'm a pretty good person. Um, it can be difficult to see, who exactly makes us feel good, but it's important to check in with yourself and notice, how do I feel after I talk with these people? Do I feel good? Do I feel great? Do I feel not so great? Um, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You can always start with the friendships you have and develop those further. It's important to remember, we want to look for those people that are not only healthy, but are going to listen to us, be attentive to us, and not going to judge us. Very, very big and important. Speaking of social support, Cancer Support Community does offer support groups at different hospital sites. We have patient, caregiver, survivorship groups, and some cancer-specific groups that I have listed. So if you want more information, I can always provide that. Next up is meditation. So you can go ahead and use your chat or raise your hand if you've heard of meditation before. But I feel like this is one stress reduction technique that gets a bad rap. I feel like a lot of the time people think of sitting cross-legged on a pillow, saying Om for hours at a time, or listening to tribal chants, which I'm not going to knock that. If it works for you, great. But that's not the only way to meditate. Meditation is truly, again, all about mindfulness, focusing on being in the moment, or if you can, truly think of nothing. Easier said than done. But just being in the moment, not in the past or the future, just being here in the present, being present with yourself and your thoughts and your feelings. If done properly, we can see that stress go down, depression go down, anxiety, and improvement in our memory and attention and overall empathy. Because the part of our mind that, creates those positive thoughts and feelings gets stimulated when we do this. Um, and, if you've never tried, meditation at all, I'm sure if you've ever had a coloring book at some point in time in your life, you've already done one form of meditation, which is coloring. Coloring is a great form of meditation because it encourages you to just focus on the image you're coloring right in that moment. Focus on how it feels as you move the crayon or marker or what have you across the paper, and to just be there in the moment. Speaking of meditation, CSC does offer free guided meditation class Thursdays at 5:30. And so my last stress reduction technique, and probably one of the hardest on this list, is self-compassion. Um, 9 times out of 10, we are our own worst enemies. We all have an internal voice within ourselves that helps us guide our way throughout the world. You know, sometimes we talk to ourselves, and that's okay. But unfortunately, this voice can be a little bit negative. And when that voice is negative, remember that mind body connection, those thoughts are going to influence our behaviors and ultimately how we feel about ourselves. Um, that's why it's important to engage with those thoughts. If you hear, those negative thoughts, to maybe work with them and say, no, that's not true. I'm doing my best. I'm working my hardest. And if that's a struggle, ask yourself these simple questions. Would you say what you're saying internally to yourself to someone you love? Would you say it to your kiddos? Would you say it to a friend or a family member if they came to you with these problems? If the answer is no, then maybe it's time to rethink how you're talking to yourself and maybe approach yourself with a bit more kindness, a bit more love. And you're probably, those harsh thoughts are probably not true. Again, our minds have a great way of just going above and beyond to someplace negative. Um, and a great way to deal with this is combining this with journaling, like we talked about earlier. Getting those feelings outside of yourself, writing them down, allowing the journal to hold that for you so you're not building that up like the Coke bottle. And then if you're so apt, scribbling over those thoughts because chances are they're not true. It's important to be kind and compassionate to ourselves because it's very, very easy to be very mean and cruel. So, what are my take home notes for you today as you've spent the past half hour, odd half hour with me? Is practice, practice, practice. Practice makes permanent. Any of these stress reductions could work for you, but it's important to practice them. And more importantly, practice them when you're not stressed so your mind can make that connection. Oh, hey, I'm breathing. I'm doing square breathing. Oh, wow, I did that when I wasn't stressed. I should calm down. This is how how a talks with your brain can work. But yeah, it's important to practice that so that way it can become a bit more second nature. Think of your mind as a filing cabinet. The more we use that technique, the closer that file gets to the front rather than being put in the back. And try one thing more than once. Just because it didn't necessarily work the first time doesn't mean it's not for you. Maybe you need to try it differently or try it again. And get creative, try if anything stood out to you, but you're kind of on the fence about it, maybe put your own spin on it. There's no wrong way to do any of these, truly. Um, and most importantly, these are not the only ways to reduce stress. As I said earlier, we only have so much time and only have one presentation, but um, if you have anything that works for you personally that is healthy, um, you know, no need to reinvent the wheel. That's still helpful and still going to work for you. The ways I brought up today are the ones that are just empirically evidenced, scientifically validated, all that jazz. But it most certainly doesn't mean that anything you bring up is not effective. So with that, I am going to stop the recording. Um, Give me 1 minute.